This is I Am Albert Einstein, and this is the last chapter of our story, chapter 5, Putting All of the Pieces Together. When Albert and Elsa visited the United States for the first time in 1921, after he won the Nobel Prize, thousands of people showed up in New York to greet their boat and the world-famous scientist. Albert was as popular as the biggest movie stars and political leaders of the day. There were parades in his honor, and he was even invited to the White House, where he met President Warren Harding. When he returned to the United States in 1931, Albert met famous people like Helen Keller. He and Elsa didn't stop at America. They traveled all over the world to the same kind of acclaim. The one place where Albert wasn't exactly popular, though, was back at home. World War I had left Germany crippled by a huge death toll, a terrible economy, and a scarcity of food. Lots of people, unemployed and unhappy, wanted to find a clear reason for their problems. The Jewish people became the scapegoat. They began to blame the Jews for all of their troubles. Despite Albert's fame and genius, he was not safe from the rise in anti-Semitism. German scientists began to criticize his work simply because he had been born a Jew. Albert hadn't grown up in a religious family or even thought of himself primarily as a Jew. He saw himself as first a human being and then as a scientist. But he didn't try to run away from his identity, and these kinds of attacks only strengthened his bond to the Jewish people. As he said himself, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake is an almost fanatical love of justice and the desire for personal independence. These are the features of the Jewish tradition, which make me thank my stars that I belong to it. Albert joined the Zionist movement, whose mission was to create a homeland for the Jews. The purpose of his first trip to the United States was to raise money for the Jewish state. The work of Albert and others just like him resulted in the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. However, back in 1932, Albert's future was uncertain. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party were rising in power, and their idea that ridding Germany of all of its Jews would solve their problems. Albert, in particular, seriously hated by the Nazis. Not only was he a Jew, but he was the most famous Jew in the world. They attacked him and his ideas by burning books that he had written and by making threats against his life. Still, it took a while to convince Albert to leave his home in Berlin. Like so many others, he couldn't fathom that 6 million Jews would be killed in the Nazis' evil plan. And here's a picture of them burning his books. Finally, it was December 1932. Albert and Elsa left Germany. It wasn't a moment too soon, because a month later, Hitler and the Nazis who raided Albert's home took control of the government. The attack on Jews was immediate and deadly. The Einsteins settled in America, where Albert took a position at the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. He loved America's core value of freedom, and he settled into a quiet life of work, playing his violin and spending his time with his family. In the suburban New Jersey town, he was an ordinary neighbor, just waving to the folks on the 2-mile walk he took every day to the Institute and helping kids with their math homework. Elsa passed away in December of 1936, leaving Albert with a lot of quiet time. Here's Albert's neighborhood in America, which he enjoyed and when he would walk through on his mile walk. His 2-mile walk. The quiet didn't last long. World War II broke out in 1939, and the United States entered the war on December 7, 1941, after the Japanese, who were on the side of Germany and Italy, bombed Pearl Harbor, a naval base in Hawaii, killing 2,400 people. Albert was, of course, opposed to the war on principle, but World War II presented a more complicated situation. Hitler and the Nazis were terrible, and they needed to be stopped. To make matters worse, Albert got information that German scientists were working on creating an atomic bomb. During World War II, Albert heard that the Germans were well on their way to making an atom bomb. Albert found himself in a tough situation. He was a pacifist, through and through, but if the Nazis controlled such a powerful weapon, then they would surely win the war, and that would be terrible for all of humankind. Devastated that scientists were using his beloved equation of E equals mc squared for the purposes of war, Albert made a difficult decision, and he urged President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to make the atom bomb first. Certain aspects of the situation seemed to call for watchfulness and, if necessary, quick action on part of the administration, he wrote in his famous letter from August 2nd, 1939. President Roosevelt listened to Albert, and the United States began to work on a top-secret Manhattan Project, a project involving a group of scientists who created an atom bomb in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And even though Albert had made the recommendation, he, like most Americans, had no idea about the Manhattan Project. Because of his very public anti-war views, the government leaders didn't feel that they could completely trust Albert to keep the secret. And here is President FDR sitting at his desk reading Albert's letter. The secret was revealed after the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945. More than 100,000 people were killed. The Japanese surrendered and the World War II was over. Many felt that the atom bomb was a necessary evil to stop a war that had a devastating effect on the entire world. But for Albert, the cost of all those civilian deaths was just too high. The aging scientist regretted writing that letter to the president for the rest of his life. Albert spent his later years using his celebrity status to pursue peace. His heroes became people who used non-violent methods for change, such as Mahatma Gandhi and African-American civil rights leaders. He worked tirelessly to put an end to the use of nuclear weapons. He became an advocate of a world government. He became focused on that all countries could work together instead of fighting one another. Unfortunately, most people dismissed Albert as an idealist and as a dreamer, and that he dreamed the impossible, not unlike many scientists when he first published his first important theories. In addition to peace, Albert continued to work on his last big idea, the theory of everything. His obsession with what he called the unified field theory, something that would bring together the whole of physics into one idea. It began in 1925. Because he didn't like the concept that things happen randomly, he started looking for a single theory that joined together many separate theories on how the universe works. This idea would explain everything from the particles of an atom to the rotation of the planets. His search for this amazing theory led him to a lot of interesting ideas. One of them was the belief that the universe grows and shrinks, and it isn't a fixed size as scientists then assumed. In 1929, Edwin Hubble, an astronomer, showed that the universe was expanding. The galaxies were moving farther away from one another, proving Albert right yet again. He spent the next 30 years searching. Even after he officially retired, he spent many hours getting tangled up in advanced math, following equations to dead ends, and imagining countless theories. However, he never found the mysterious unifying theory, keeping at it until he died on April 18, 1955. Although he was 76 years old, he never lost the same inquisitiveness that he had when he was just a little boy. "I have no special talents," Albert said. "I am only passionately curious." So there's a couple parts that I moved over that I'd like to go back to share with you. One of the parts that I had skipped over was about bomb basics. Albert's revolutionary equation E equals mc squared showed that a tiny amount of matter, such as an atom, held a huge amount of energy. Although this led to the process of nuclear fission, although Albert didn't come up with that, fission is a process in which the nucleus of an unstable atom splits into two parts, releasing energy and neutrons. This was the basis of the atom bomb, where an unstable atom, like uranium, is bombarded with particles to split the atom and release the energy inside. One atom splitting only releases a relatively small amount of energy, but as part of a chain reaction, with one split atom causing another to split and on, the amount of energy is enough to destroy a whole city and maybe many of its inhabitants in sheer minutes. Another part that I had skipped over that I wanted to share with you was the picture of the Hubble telescope, which has given us so much important information, like our universe is expanding. This gives you a pretty good idea of the map of Europe during the time of 1936. And then here, as we end our book on I Am Albert Einstein, are 10 things you should know about Albert Einstein and 10 more things that are pretty cool to know about Albert Einstein. Number 1, Albert Einstein was born to a Jewish family in a small town of Ulm, Germany on March 14, 1879. Number 2 is that he had a big head as a baby and didn't utter a word until he was about 2 years old, which worried his family that something was wrong with him. Number 3 was that his parents, Pauline and Herman, encouraged their kids to pursue knowledge by asking as many questions as they could come up with. Number 4 is that Albert didn't like school when he was a kid because he didn't get along with the other boys, and his teacher thought he was rude for asking too many questions. Number 5 is that Albert graduated college from the Swiss Federal Polytechnic Institute in Zurich, and he became a Swiss citizen in 1901. For number 6, he worked at the Swiss Patent Office for 8 years, during which he wrote papers on 4 of his most important theories in 1 year. For number 7, Albert was married twice. First to Mileva Merck, whom he had 2 sons before their divorce, and then to Elsa Lowenthal, who remained his wife until her death in 1936. When Albert's general theory of relativity was proved correct in 1919, he became an overnight sensation and a worldwide celebrity for changing how people think about the universe. That one was number 8. For number 9, Albert and Elsa fled the Nazis and their German homeland in 1932 and immigrated to America, where he worked hard to make the Zionist dream of a Jewish state a reality. And for number 10, long after he retired from the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, Albert continued to search for the solution to his last big idea, that unified field theory, an idea that would explain all of physics, but he never found it. 10 more really cool things to know about. Number 1 is the Einstein syndrome. It's a term that was coined to describe exceptionally bright children who don't talk much until later than the average child. Number 2 is that Albert invented a type of refrigerator with another scientist in 1926. Number 3 is that Albert kept the notes for his 4 famous papers in Hans' baby carriage and would take them out while he took the baby on walks outside. Number 4 is that Albert worked so hard on his general theory of relativity that he lost a total of 50 pounds. Number 5 is that Albert played violin his whole life, and his favorite composers were Bach, Schubert, and Mozart. Another one of his favorite hobbies was sailing, even though he couldn't swim. Number 6 is that he never wore pajamas. "I sleep as nature made me," he said. Number 7 is that he sold a handwritten copy of his 1905 paper on special relativity for $6.5 million in 1944, and then he donated all that money to the Allied war effort. Number 8 is that after Albert's theory of relativity was proved right by the pictures of stars taken during a solar eclipse, he celebrated by buying himself a new violin. For number 9, for 22 years, FBI agents tapped Albert's phone and went through his mail looking for proof that he was a spy for the Soviet Union. And finally, number 10, the doctor who performed the autopsy on Albert's body to figure out how he died stole the scientist's brain and kept it for more than 40 years. Wow, that was very interesting. I hope that you've enjoyed learning about Albert Einstein. Next, we'll be learning more about Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you for watching.